fire shelters are, I think they're certainly a good safety item, but they're heavy, and I know any extra weight when you're a jumper, particularly when you're having to pack out 120 pounds or so, everything that you have out is something you'd rather not do. And this wasn't probably the prudent thing to do, but typically, if you had a jump load of jumpers and they all jumped, and you look back in the plane, you'd see all these fire shelters strewn through the plane. They had them with them, of course, because they had to, and they took them out and threw them in the plane and jumped out so they wouldn't have to carry them. I mean, I think about that sometimes, and it's probably not a good thing to do, but that was a fairly common practice just because it was heavy, and you tried not to as light as you possibly could when you had to get out of there. It's kind of funny looking back on it now, if you got in a situation where you needed that darn thing. The idea was not to put yourself in that situation, but it's a lot of hubris to think that you could always control a situation like that, and when you really can't. But that seemed to be what people generally would do, just laying all over the plane, And that was frowned upon even then. I mean, I don't think the jumpers frowned upon it, but certainly the powers that be would have. I mean, that was a huge safety violation, to do that. But a lot of places, as I mentioned that one time we had to crawl through that brush down to the fire in the bottom of the drainage, a fire shelter wouldn't have done you any good. You would have had to run away from that thing and get to an area that you could be safe in, because, that you would have burned up in any sort of shelter. Unless it was lead or something, that would have been it, because you need a lot of area, to be able to withstand that sort of that heat and wind and everything. So that was something that most people probably didn't know, And in Alaska, they had this plane called the Volpar, which is very, very short plane, very fast, because Alaska's big, so they wanted it fast, but it's got a small door, and it doesn't slow down as much that you'd like it to slow down, like a Twin Otter or something like that, where you can get a nice, clean exit out. And so you really had to be a forceful exit, but the door was relatively small, and so it was easy, particularly if you're the second person, to try to get in that door and really rocket yourself out. But one time we're jumping a fire, I'm the second guy, the first guy's already in the door, so he has a better chance, then you have to kind of, drag yourself in there and try to maneuver your way in the door. And so it's my turn to go. I pull out and I kind of hit my right shoulder on the door, and so I just, out of heck with it, I just sort of like start falling out instead of really getting a good exit, and the slipstream just sucks me right out. And I open up with my feet are up I'm upside down, completely upside down. My feet are up in the risers there, and I'm kicking my feet, to try to get out. And fortunately, it just boing, came back out, and I'm, seeing all kinds of stars, and I'm going for the spot. But my jump partner opened up. He's looking back at the plane as he's opening up, and he's looking up, and he tells me later on he sees me up there with my feet completely upside down, trying to kick my feet out there. So that wasn't a good thing. That wasn't good. You don't want to land on your head, certainly, and you can't steer, so you don't know where you're going. And it was Alaska, so you might end up in a river or some kind of lake or somewhere else, which wouldn't be good either, particularly upside down. But that was kind of embarrassing, But he was the only one that saw it, So I don't mind telling it, but because it's almost kind of funny now. But it was because it was that type of an airplane, and I sort of just gave it. Once I hit my shoulder, I should have probably just went back and made another pass and gone out, but I didn't. I just let myself sort of get sucked out. And we used to call the plane the flying brick, because it couldn't slow down enough without stalling to get a nice clean exit like you would at some of the other aircraft. We called a lot of things like that. We called the radio the electric brick. It always had to do with weight, I think. Something was heavy. You just would rather not have it on there. That's why you'd like a crosscut rather than a chainsaw, if you could get away with it, because that would be a lot less weight to lug out, and that was important if you had a long pack out. That's probably the hardest part of the job, really. I think is packing all that stuff out. If you have a long way to go and it's hilly, hard on your knees, the ankles, things like that. particularly going downhill. You get that weight, trying to balance out 110, 120 pounds. That's probably the hardest job. Sometimes when you're finished one of those, your knees are almost, they feel like they're humming, kind of, they're just vibrating because you had so much weight on them. That was probably the hardest part of the job. But smoke jumping was just, it was firefighting. Just the way you got there. So I mean, you had that 1 or 2 minutes of, which could be kind of a scary ride, and then it's just bending over and sweating, and swinging a tool or operating some kind of machinery. It's no different than if you walked or got a bus ride or a helicopter ride in that sense. So